Dr. Pravir Malik is a systems thinker, technologist, and an author whose work reimagines the quantum layer through the lens of complex systems. His area of extensive work is the cosmology of light, wherein he presents light as both the material and spiritual foundation of the universe. He was a guest speaker during the second Global Vedic Conference held at Prasanthi Nilayam in January 2026. And in his talk at Sai Kulwant Hall, he offered a Vedic perspective on the science of consciousness and creation. Loving Sairam and a warm welcome to you, sir, to the studios of Sri Sathya Sai Media Center. You have spent decades studying light, the physics of it, and also exploring the metaphysics behind this phenomenon called light. And when we look at our scriptures, the divine in our Vedas is always picturized as the one who is full of light, the one with supreme effulgence. So we would love to listen from you. When we say God is light and light is love, how do you understand this? But before that, you are here in Prasanthi Nilayam for the very first time. So tell us, how does it feel to be here and to be part of the Veda conference?
Yes, it feels very, very nice. And I must say that actually, many years ago, it's coming back to me now, but when I was about 20, I went through a very difficult time. And it was like what they call a dark night of the soul. And that opened some doors within. And I began to search for meaning through different kinds of yogas or different systems of knowledge. And it comes back to me, I was in Chicago in those days. And there was a group that was affiliated with Satya Sai Baba. And I remember going to the satsangs for a period of maybe a year or so, where we would meet Thursday nights and we would read from his words and then do some bhajans as well. So that connection was there many years ago. And also I had the privilege of seeing him in dream at that time. Of course, one doesn't really realize those things, but and there's a time and a space for everything. And this is the time for me to visit this place after 40 years of when I first had that kind of opening, if you can say. So it's very nice to be here. And I think it's just wonderful that this Vedic conference is at the mandir where his samadhi is, and that is an extraordinary place. It's charged, it's vibrating with something that's very different than when you step outside. And to feel that and to experience that is surely a great privilege.
Bhagwan's Sannidhi, for all the Sai devotees, it is the most love charged place on the planet.
Yes, definitely. It's made this conference have a different meaning to it.
If you look at Indian culture, we see that light plays such a big role in all our rituals. We begin our prayers with lighting a lamp and we end it with arti, which is again offering light to the Lord. And our rishis, who were indeed spiritual scientists, they gave us all these rituals. And we know that there is indeed a lot of inner meaning and depth behind all these practices. So, in your mind, when we engage in these holy rituals, how should we approach these practices?
Sure. Yes, I must say that if one's life is focused on light, it's a long journey and there's many entry points into it. And when I was very young, I had some experiences. But when you're young, you think it's normal. And it's only later when you look back and you realize that those were experiences of light. And what got me really interested in delving much more deeply into the power of light, it was a very practical question that I began with because I had mentioned that dark night that I experienced, but shortly after that, as I emerged from it, spontaneously one day I was trying to resolve some situation in my life, And it just emerged that I should engulf the whole situation in light and the people involved and so on. And I did that. And I concentrated very deeply without understanding exactly what I was doing, but it just was an inner pull. And then miraculously, the very next day, the situation was resolved. And the people who were part of it began to treat me very differently with a lot of love, which was something that just drew my attention very deeply. And so I began, having had a computer science background and an engineering background, I wanted to understand, what is it about light that's so powerful? And so initially, when I began to enter into the world of light, I did so with the question, why does light travel at 186,000 miles per second in vacuum? Why does it have a constant speed? And I imagined that there was a reason for it. There was a reason why it's happening that way. And so, to understand that more deeply, I began to imagine what reality would look like if light were to travel at different speeds. And the first place I went to was, all right, so what would things be like if light traveled infinitely fast? And so in the thought experiment, it was very simple. I imagined a very large space, a volume, and a source of light at the center. And since it's traveling very fast, infinitely fast, it fills up the whole volume instantaneously, so it's omnipresent. Since it's present everywhere, it's connecting everything instantaneously in its substance. And so, whatever's happening in its substance, whether things arise or disappear, it has a complete knowledge of everything in that volume. So, it's omniscient. If anything not of the nature of light is to arise, it will eventually be overpowered by that nature of light. And so, it's omnipotent, it's all powerful. And then, since everything is happening in the substance of that light, there's a feeling, there's a sense of omni-lovingness. And so it occurred to me that when light's traveling infinitely fast, that must be the source state of the light. So when we experience light traveling slower, then that must be a projection from that state where light is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and omni-loving. And in religious terms and spiritual terms, we could say that that's somehow how we think of God. When we think of God as being omnipresent, omnipotent, omni-loving, omniscient, then this simple exercise of imagining light to travel infinitely fast gives us the same qualities. So now scientifically, we have a bridge between light that's traveling at 186,000 miles per second and light, when we imagine it at infinitely fast, we are seeing how that same light can project itself at a slower speed. And when it projects itself, the amazing thing is that those four properties that we imagine that exist, that even in modern terms, we give the word Satchitananda.
Yes.
But if we think about Satchitananda, it's nothing but that, because the Sat aspect is that of truth, of presence. It's present everywhere. The Chit is consciousness force. So it's that knowledge and it's that omnipotence. And then the Ananda is the bliss or the love. So the Satchitananda, what we don't acknowledge enough in science, but I'm going to draw that bridge because I want to come back to the question that you asked as to how do we think about, say, a simple the ritual of say looking at light. But in order to answer that, I want to draw this larger frame. So I'm saying that there's these four properties that are inside light. That's what light is. And then when it projects itself at 186,000 miles per second, it's an intentionality because it wants existence and the universe and material manifestation to arise in a certain way. What do I mean by that? Without going too deep, but if we look at the structure of particles, whether we're looking at the quantum particle level or the level of periodic table, the atoms, or the level of molecular plans and cells, we find scientifically that they are all defined by four qualities. There's four structures. There's a structure that has four categories, regardless. And just I'll give you a quick example. When you think about any living being on planet Earth, whether it's a animal or a human or a plant, the cell has four molecular plans in it. We call these nucleic acids, polysaccharides, lipids, and proteins. But if you look more deeply into what these are, then you see that nucleic acids creates all the knowledge in the cells. It creates the DNA. So it's the same thing as that knowledge that's projected inside a cell. So light is projecting its property of knowledge as nucleic acids inside the cell. If you think about polysaccharides, they're the source of energy and power inside the cell. And so we can say that omnipotence of light, when light's traveling infinitely fast, is projecting itself as this power inside cells. And then if you think about lipids, lipids create natural compartments in cells, and this creates harmony. And so we can think about that aspect of the omni-harmony that exists when light's traveling infinitely fast as projecting itself, and these lipids becoming a vehicle to express that at the level of the cell. And further, when we think about proteins, these are the workhorse elements. In a human cell, there are over 30,000 different proteins, and they all do very specific tasks. So they create a ubiquitous presence inside the cell. So that's what we can call the Sath that's being projected inside the cell. So what we're seeing is that, and I just gave one example, but the same thing I can also talk about at the periodic table level, at the quantum particle level. The point being is that when we experience anything, whether it's material or non-material, it is embedded with this properties of light. But there's one tremendous mystery, because we find that in nature, any kind of substance that is stable is always a combination of all four of these energies. So a living cell can't be a living cell unless it has all four of these energies in it. Similarly, if you look at the combination of different molecules and the periodic table itself, it's structured into four categories, S shell, P shell, D shell, F shell. But the point is that all these atoms have to work together to create, whether it's an animate object or an inanimate object, and the variety that we see around us. And again, that means that light is deeply, deeply embedded inside. When we look at light, then actually what we are contemplating on is this miracle of manifestation that shows up as material light, but it is nothing other than this power that we can, as we can call it, God or infinity or immortality or whatever we want to call it, divinity, but it is there in the smallest things that exist materially. And so when we are looking at a flame, not only are we contemplating that nature, but we are invoking the same thing in us. And that connection with the intimate power of light becomes much more real. When we consider light traveling infinitely fast, then you can't distinguish between these four things. They're all one. That's why we call it Satchitananda. But one means there's unity, and that means that it's bound by love. So love is the secret inside light. And the same thing is true in the material level. Nothing can exist without love. So whether we have at the quantum particle level, at the level of atoms, at the level of molecules, at the level of cells, when we look at the structure of an atom, it requires all four quantum particles, four different kinds of quantum particles, to come together in an act of love to ensure the stability of the atom. So, whether we're looking at an animate object or an inanimate object, it is got this love and light inside it, and it's intimate with its structure. And that's something that we don't necessarily pay attention to, but it's the secret of, if all is Brahman, then Brahman is everywhere. And that love and light have to be everywhere as well. We haven't learned to see it. And by visualizing or by looking at a flame, it begins to open a door by which we can begin to see that mystery that's inside it. The mystery of what light is and how love is just inside of that light.
Well, that's the scientific way of looking at Sarvam Vishnumayam Jagat. And at the same time, you mentioned how by projecting light, we can indeed change the behavior of people around us. And that's so profound. It is so significant. Swami always asked us to do the sadhana of Jyoti meditation. So, which means this light meditation is something that all of us who can do should do if we want to help others and if we want to help ourselves, isn't it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that also reminds me of a period when we had the pandemic around 2020.
Yes.
What happened was that I was working for an organization prior to that, a company called Zappos, that is known to be very progressive in terms of its practices. And one day I was asked, because I had done some theoretical workshops on light, and before the pandemic, I had held a couple of these light meditations for some interested groups within the organization. So when the pandemic hit and everything became online, then the chief human resource officer of the organization actually asked me to kind of accelerate and to conduct several of these workshops for the employees every week. And so I would have a 2-hour workshop. In the first hour, I would talk about the theory so that people can then get the reasoning as to why light is so powerful. And I gave a brief kind of summary of that when we talked earlier. And then in the second part, in the second hour, we would do practical meditation, there was nothing that could not be included in the meditation. So it could be a project you're working on, it could be some issue you're experiencing with some person, it could be some family problem, it could be something in your marketplace is not going the way it should. It could be absolutely anything. It could be a conflict happening in the world. And what we would do is we would kind of then, first of all, imagine a light, the light inside us. So each of us would imagine the light inside us and step into it. So we would step into the comfort of that light and feel, forget about for a moment that, we're kind of emotional, mental beings who experience sensations, but just go into what that light is and try to feel the substance of it. And then we would gradually begin to expand that once we felt it, began to expand it larger and larger. So first of all, it encompassed who we are, who we think we are. It would be encompassed with light. And then we would begin to call in some of these problems and let light with its logic, which is not our logic, kind of work on things. And we would just imagine all this, and it could be, as I said, something very small. You could be having a cut somewhere on your body that you want to, or a pain that you want to resolve, or it could be a world conflict on the other side, and everything in between. And it was the same thing, and you would call it, and then you would keep imagining that this light is working on that until you felt a somatic shift. You felt some shift in your body. So, and it may take 10 minutes, it may take 15 minutes, it may take 20 minutes, but you would feel a shift. And then you would know that for now, that process was complete. And so we did this, and I asked people, since it was a corporate, I would ask them that let's be very scientific about this. So I want you to take 2 different situations that may be similar. You may be having problems with 2 different people, let's just say, or with your manager and with, say, another project manager. one, you experiment with this light, and one, you don't. And then you see over the course of 3 or 4 weeks how the situation changes, where you are actually subjecting that situation to the dynamics of light. And so this was the kind of scientific experiment that we ran. And people would experience shifts, which was pretty amazing. But anyway, this happened during COVID. I ended up doing hundreds of workshops with many people, and it expanded outside of the company as well. So then there were thousands of people who participated and then I stopped it after a while because I also got tired of it. But after 9 months, I stopped it.
So that helped people?
Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes.
When you fill yourself with that light, eventually you become that light, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
When you're saying let the logic of light take over, I feel it simply means let the wisdom of the divine take over. And that's when the solutions that will emerge will be beyond our logic.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that in all these exercises, when I conducted those workshops, I would say let go of any expectation. Let go of what you want as the outcome. Just forget it and just do this. And then as a result, whatever the outcome was, but then people began to feel much more comfortable with the situation, which helps light to actually then act more deeply. I think one of the amazing things about you being human is that we all experience any time during the day lots of different thoughts that may be very narrow, or different emotions, or even sensations, pains, and so on. But the amazing thing is that there's this power that we have access to. And even simply by changing a thought, just by changing a thought, since light is, I believe, ubiquitous, present everywhere, and even scientifically we can say it, because the most prevalent quantum particle is a photon. 98% of all quantum particles are photons, so light is ubiquitous, from even scientifically speaking. But the point is that when we make a shift in ourselves, a simple shift, or from sadness we say choose to feel joy, then what we are doing, I believe, is we're connecting with a larger, ubiquitous, infinite body of light that pervades everything. And so that we get integrated, so we are like islands, but we get integrated with the continent of light through simple things that we can do so many times a day. Just for example, instead of judging somebody, just letting it go and feeling compassion or love. Or even when we, for example, see something and we may have feelings of jealousy, again, letting that go and trying to have a different feeling instead of that. That's the process by which we integrate with this light that's everywhere. Because in some sense, if all is Brahman, if light is everywhere, it should be the easiest thing to connect with it. We just choose not to at every instant. And the choice has to change. And it can change by these simple acts. So.
And that's why the Vedas say, Yad bhavam tad bhavati. We become what we think. And I think it is because of that Swami always told us, think good, think good. Because that way we can create and recreate the good. And our true nature is to be in that collective of light. And I feel all spiritual practices are meant to help us connect to that omnipresent, omnipotent light.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So, yeah, but the amazing thing is that even if we think about technology today, we are at a very interesting point in the development of technology. So, our computational processes are now dealing with the quantum level. But let's think, what is the quantum level? The quantum level is something that separates the invisible from the visible. And we, of course, if we look at how quantum computers are being designed today, then there are certain quantum mechanical processes that are called superposition and entanglement and interference. And we are trying to leverage those properties to speed up computation of very difficult problems, so that instead of taking 10,000 years, we'll be able to do the same calculation in minutes. That's the aim of quantum computing. But what I really believe is that that aim is too small, because when we are talking about a level where we're separating, where the quantum level is the separation between the invisible and the visible, and the invisible is kind of the realm of this light that travels differently, of consciousness that's different, of everything that's going to participate and manifest on the material plane. It exists in seed form, in this kind of, I'll call it a subtle plane. But through quantum computation now, if we design different kinds of quantum computers than we're currently imagining, then we have a much more powerful way to co-create with nature. So diseases can be eradicated from that point of view with a different kind of technology, because if you can compute into the cells that may have become dysfunctional a kind of functional pattern that is resident already in kind of this subtle plane behind the quantum level, if you can parse that into and compute it into the body, so giving a different kind of very calm intervention, then it can change things. Or if we want to create, I'll just get a little more imaginative, but if we want to create a flower of a unique color and unique shape that's very beautiful, then it may be possible as well by getting the right patterns that exist at the quantum level and in that depth and computing them into the material level. So this, I think, is the great and different opportunity that technology gives that we haven't gone into yet in terms of how industry is progressing. So.
What you mention is really so exciting. But I feel that is also what the mantras are able to do, isn't it? The vibrations of the mantras are so powerful that they were able to bring changes at that level.
Yes, yes, yes. And what I'm saying here is that what I'll just say is that it's my opinion that everything materially wants to take part in this, let's just call it this divine expression. And so, yes, for those who are naturally able to use the process of mantra or yantra, it's great. But if you're not able to, but you still want to participate, and matter also wants to participate in this, then the technology can help from that point of view. But you're absolutely right, is that if perhaps it's a shortcut by using the right kind of combination of mantra and yantra that you can change things materially.
Well, every pathway has its own challenges, its own chills and thrills. And I feel the ways to understand that mysterious force also are as varied as the number of individuals on the planet.
Yes, I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the great mystery of, when Bhagavan says that God is in you. God is in you means that you, whatever you are and whoever you're becoming, is something unique and a unique expression of that divinity. And so there's going to be, as you said, there's going to be as many individuals there are, that many different ways to do this.
And maybe when we embark on that path with that level of humility and reverence, then all of these secrets will get unlocked to us.
Absolutely. I think that the big reason why we remain islands in kind of the sea of divinity is because we have, for example, like the movements, like lack of humility or lack of sincerity or lack of courage, or we become fearful, or we have a lack of love. And these are things that keep us small and separate from that thing that exists everywhere. So absolutely, it's from these virtues, these simple virtues. If we are to practice them and truly embody them, then we automatically become part of something much larger.
I think that's why Bhagwan always told us that from technology we have to take knowledge. Otherwise, technology will become trick knowledge, Swami used to always say, which means we'll be tricked by knowledge. This knowledge will take us into pathways that does not help us or the society at large.
Yes, yes, that makes a lot of sense, and that's what we're seeing with AI today. So AI. Many people are now, for example, I've experienced it in San Francisco, and I'm sure you will experience it here as well. But people will often say, "Oh, AI has given this answer, so it must be right." But it's actually a trick, as what you say, because we have to have discrimination. We have to know the subject that we're actually using AI in, and know when it's the AI is actually leading us on a wrong path. And that's becoming more. It's going to become more and more critical so that we don't en masse kind of trick ourselves. So,
I guess just like we should be the master of our senses, as mentioned in our scriptures, and it should not become vice versa. Similarly, we should be the master of the machines we create and not become their slaves.
absolutely. And interestingly, if we look at any of these science fiction movies, many of them portray that dystopian instead of utopian future. It's where the machines have taken over, or where the human ability to make a decision is completely compromised. And it's interesting that, in some sense, it kind of makes us aware of that possibility of danger much more, because it's depicted so well in so much of the movies that we see today. But it's exactly, I think you say it really well, but it's exactly that we have to become master of that technology. It's not that then we can reach toward a utopian future, not otherwise.
When Swami came to our studio in 2002 and he inaugurated this sacred place, he mentioned four words: knowledge, skill, balance, insight. Only when knowledge is skilled in the right way for the benefit of society, Swami said, it will lead to balance. Balance is that state of equipoise, that equanimity that Lord Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita. And after balance comes the stage of insight. Once you achieve balance, then things get revealed to you. And I feel that stage is almost like a stage of meditation. And we can probably reach there even through science, because even scientifically, you might just see something of nature, a miracle of nature, which can just take you into a deeper state of stillness because you marvel at what you have seen. And and you have become so quiet, and now in that state of stillness, wisdom can just happen to you. You don't even have to do anything.
Yes, yes, and I think that the wonderful thing is that there are so many ways to reach that state that you're talking about. So the simple meditation of looking at light and then bringing it inside, that's so powerful because of everything that light is. So,
Now, coming to the lifestyle in the modern times, today all of us are glued to our screens, and there are so many who cannot sleep in the night because of the light that's coming from their gadgets. For centuries, our body is so used to the sun. When there is light, we wake up. The morning sun activates us. And so body is so used to not sleeping when there is light. And our mind probably is not able to distinguish between screen light and sunlight. So what is your advice to everyone about how we should reorient our lives based on all the knowledge that we have gathered about light so far?
yeah, so I think that a lot of the technology, if we look at it, so the amazing fact is that all of modern communication and computation is driven by some frequencies of light. And so light has been filtered. And in that filtering process, it's like this reminds me of the ancient. I want to just mention, for example, like Ayurveda, where there's a wholeness. When we take a plant, or when we have a certain kind of herb, there are many, many, many different compounds and minerals that are inside that. And they all act together because there's a wisdom in the way that it was designed and the way that it interacts with the body. When we take light out of context, so for example, when we're doing the same thing as we do with medicine, we're kind of taking some things that we believe are the active elements, and then we commercialize that, and that becomes kind of pervasive in our life. And with modern gadgets as well, we've taken some aspects of light that should actually be experienced in its fullness, and we've magnified that, and it may be fine for a certain amount of time, but if we have constant exposure to that kind of lopsided magnification, then it throws things out of balance. And so the practices that you mentioned, or for example, getting out in sunlight, or viewing the morning sun, or viewing the setting sun, these are profound because, after all, the human body has evolved for millennia within that environment. And there is a kind of a oneness between the light that exists inside the sun and what's coming through, and even the way that our bodies have evolved, or all human life has evolved. For example, even the simple thing like photosynthesis,
Yes.
Which is so powerful, but it's at the base of the entire food chain, for instance. But if we go back into that wholeness through just focusing on the fullness of light, then things can get back into balance. And I think that's important. So even in the technology that we develop, we have the opportunity to develop technology, to use frequencies that are balanced with a larger kind of cocktail of frequencies. We may use a specific frequency for a particular reason, but in the device that we're using, we can balance it with, even technologically, with beginning to have a filter of the fullness of light so that it doesn't have that kind of deleterious effect on us. So these are all things that, with science, and even with what we've begun to understand with science, we're only tapping the surface. Everything that we believe we have all the knowledge of the last couple of 100 years since the scientific revolution is just so tiny. It's a tip of the iceberg, and yet we have hundreds and hundreds of years ahead, where we need to, in order to survive those hundreds of years and kind of be flourishing beings, we need to step into that wholeness much more. And that's also where we can go back to the Vedas, because those were inspired. That was inspired knowledge. It was revealed knowledge in its fullness by sages who had a different kind of sight, and their sight was whole. They received whole. They didn't filter it in ways that destroyed that wholeness. And that's, in a sense, also what we need to get into more, whether we're developing technology or whether, as we spoke earlier, we're going to use more mantra and yantra and different practices and rituals, and even if it's a Vedic fire burning or whatever it might be. But those are the things that we need to balance with. And as has been said in this conference as well, I want to, that the Vedas is eternal, and that knowledge is, somehow, and even today the point was made that it is only due to neglect that we have kind of forgotten it, or we've moved away from it. But it's perhaps as easy to go back and to not neglect. It doesn't require so much of effort on our parts. It requires the right effort, the right choices to kind of step back into wholeness, whether it's health or whether it's with the the kind of infrastructure we're creating or the cities we're creating, it's we have to just simply make a choice at every kind of micro instant to choose largest instead of smallness.
The Vedas are all about inclusiveness and being in tune with nature. As you said, when we magnify something in isolation, then that leads to distortion. And when that distortion comes into our body, then that probably reflects as cancer and so on. So it's so important to align all our research to be in tune with nature and to be aligned with what is mentioned in our scriptures, because what the rishis gave us are not just knowledge, they were revelations which had come out of divine inspiration. So, finally, can I ask you, what is your understanding and insight about this quote of Bhagwan? Love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never.
I think that is one of the things that I'm understanding more being here is of the tremendous practical vision that Satya Sai Baba had, that Bhagwan had, and how he wanted everyone to experience, whether it's the divinity or the knowledge. It's not the purview of a few select people or an elite group. It's everyone's. And so this mantra that you mentioned, love all, serve all, hurt never, help ever, it's so profound because if we were to practice that, then the island that we are begins to dissolve. And we automatically, that infinity, that power that is in light, it becomes a much more intimate part of who we are. So even in our operation, in our day-to-day operation, then we become something different, which I think is what the profundity of that simple mantra is.
So beautiful. In spiritual parlance, our life is a journey, and it's a journey which crosses through three stages.
Yes,
First is we are in the light.
yes,
Next, the light is in me. And then finally, we realize that I am the light. I feel like today we got a very
yes,
beautiful scientific perspective of this journey that all of us are on.
yes,
Thank you so much for filling us with such enlightening
yes.
perspectives about light, spirituality, and divinity.